spent 2 weeks now talking about the action aspect of the 3 A's, the awareness, the analysis, and action. And I've tried to give you some insights into different things you can do to carry out this action once you see what the impacts might be or how you perceive they might be. And so I thought, let's just take a moment and kind of go back over these. And, we start off by looking at the questions. Well, what can we do? What do we want to do? And what should we do with regard to action? And sometimes, it's important that we really understand what we should do and make sure that eventually it can turn into what we can do if there's a problem in the beginning with the difference there. And then what we did was we kind of sat back and we said, well, how are things adapted? We talked about Rogers' book. I held it up. It's an excellent book on the diffusion of technology. And we saw there was kind of this curve that starts out gradual and picks up and then slows down as the market or the number of people that are going to pick up whatever it is that's being developed is pretty well saturated. It could be your market share. It could be, gee whiz, I have all I need now, whatever. But the question then becomes one, well, how can I control this adaptation? Can I drop the demand? Can I slow it down so that it's so slow that it's not worth the effort to do whatever it is we're planning to do to get some technology into use? Because the person that's going to buy it or utilize it says, hey, wait a minute, this is moving so slow, I've got opportunity costs here, and I would be better taking the money and invest it in something else because I'll get a quicker return. And, of course, when you think of return, you've got to always consider the tax structure and how it plays into all this. And that, by the way, gives you another entree into the system of diffusion to have some control, although it's probably a weak connection, but it's there anyway. And we said this adoption curve is affected by a group of people. You might call them stakeholders. Those were people that had any connection either with being affected by a technology, being the person that purchases the technology, being the person that utilizes it, and the person that is making it, the regulators that oversee it, if there are any, whatever the case may be, the investors. These are all what you call stakeholders. Then there were the early adopters. People like trying new things, or they have a vision and they say, we could really use this. And so they're important. And if you can get to any of these groups, that's good. And then, of course, there's gatekeepers. These are people that say, well, that's a nice idea, but, if our system ain't broke, don't bother to fix it. Or there are people that say, you haven't really thought this out. You haven't done your due diligence. Here's some points of view you hadn't thought about. There's a government regulation coming over the horizon you haven't thought about, or whatever. I also want to put in this classification of people that affect this curve are significant others. These are people that are kind of like gatekeepers in the sense that if you're really not sure about how this is going to work or whatever, you have a friend that's, say, a specialist in an area that could tell you a little bit more than you know about whatever this technology is and how it's going to behave and what it might do. You go to them and you talk, and because they're your friend, you trust them or whatever, they've been good in the past, you go with what they say. These are people, the gatekeepers, the early adapters, the stakeholders, and if you get involved in this, you become a stakeholder, actually, and significant others. These are people that are important, and the Rogers, who did a lot of his work in ag extension, uh, came into it when he started out. Agriculture was very tradition oriented. So the idea of a new device, a new seed, a new thing to do to your fields, or a way to handle your money or whatever. Well, hey, listen, we've got that figured out. My grandpa did it this way. That's the way we do it. And it's interesting, when I was in high school, I worked for my uncle, who was a John Deere dealer in southern Illinois in a small town of Walnut. And I was working with him and living with him as a freshman in high school. And one of the workers said, so-and-so is going off to college to be a farmer. But what a waste of time. What's he going to learn out of a book? Well, the extension people had to confront that, and Rogers was one of them who was very successful. And so what they did, they'd find a farmer that was looked up to in the community, and they'd say, if you want to try this new product or new way of doing things, we'll work with you, and you can be kind of a trial. Let people see what's going on. And because he's a farmer and he's respected, other farmers are going to pay attention to him. So they would do that. Well, suddenly they discover the person the extension people were working for is driving a Cadillac, and you're still driving a beat-up old little car that's got over 100,000 on it. And you think, gee whiz, there must be something going on here. What's going on? Well, it's because this guy's doing better. Oh, well, gee, maybe I'll take on that new technique. Well, the thing that's fascinating was that curve was very slow-moving back in the early days in agriculture. I've been told by my friends in the extension that people come to their office and say, what's new? What's new? We got to have it. And you'll find the same thing's true. I mean, dear me. I was in Chicago one time, and I was walking down Michigan Avenue, and here's a whole bunch of people sitting in chairs outside the Apple store. And I said, what are you guys doing out here? He said, we're waiting for the new iPhone. They couldn't wait to get it. I mean, that new technology, they just had to have it. That adoption curve was like a step function, just up and like that. So it's very important that you understand these folks and the role they play in the adoption and the role you can play in affecting that adoption as well. We listened to Greg Susan, who talked a little bit about the ethics of doing things in harmony with nature, and how he was living his ethic and doing it, and how his life was happier. And I thought that one of the most interesting things that he said was that it turns out that Americans' satisfaction with life, or happiness, was greatest, and I believe it was in the 50s or 50s, and it's been falling down ever since. And yet we have more technology, we have more of this, that, and the other thing, more stuff, and we're not as happy. So we have to think about that. And he brought out some very excellent points. And then finally, with regard to keeping track of our communication, we talked about the interaction matrix, which gave you a little paradigm or technique for keeping track of who talks to who and when. And it's just a bookkeeping device, you might say, and allows you to couple that with your project planning diagrams and critical path techniques and things like that. Then we talked about the tech transfer process in greater detail and showed how you can fit in to various points of that process to bring about some change. And finally, we talked about the extreme importance of communication and trying to understand where each person is coming from, their kind of background, and to become friends so there's trust. And if there's trust, there can be real communication. And if there's real communication, you can get real conviction because you've tested your ideas against one another. True conviction comes from a dialogue between alternative ideas. Common sense, a phrase that you should always remember. And when we're in a trusting state and the masks are off, then we know how people really feel, and we have the best chance of testing our ideas. So that's it. And next time we get together, we'll kind of summarize everything. Thank you, and we'll see you later. Bye for now.